All right, hello, and welcome to another episode of Roster Reconstruction. We have the big three, the unholy three, your host. We have Josh Earl, Garrett Bouguet, and myself, Corban Ford. You can follow us all on our respective social media channels, which we'll promote later at the end of the show. Follow Swish Theory on Twitter at Swish Theory, Swish Theory, all one word, and then swishtheory.com. But yeah, we are back. We are excited. We are continuing a concept that we explored in an earlier episode of Roster Construction, which was NBA Hold'em, which is a fun team building exercise. And we are doing a series now, kind of launching a series based off of that concept. We are putting this one strictly in the 90s. And in case you didn't remember the NBA Hold'em series or didn't listen, which you can go back and do so, we do have Garrett here, and Garrett's going to break down for those who are uninitiated exactly how NBA Hold'em works.
Okay, so Texas Hold'em, the poker, the card game. Essentially, you get a flop, a turn, and a river, which are 5 cards in the middle of the table that everyone that's playing in the game essentially shares those cards, right? And then you also get 2 cards that are just yours that are face down that no one else sees. So I just basically took that concept and wanted to apply it to team building, roster construction, that sort of thing. And so what we're doing is, in essence, we are all starting with a couple of players, or potentially 3 players in one case, that we all share. And then we are picking our own players, in essence, our 2 cards that are face down on the table in Texas Hold'em, and of players that we think are good fits around the players that we're all sharing. So we're mostly picking, we're exclusively picking duos that, had a lot of success, but failed to get to the mountaintop. And the idea is we're going to try to pick some players that, could have supported them and potentially gotten them a championship had they been on the roster with them. And we're using role players from, any time period, whether that's current or from the 70s or 80s or 90s, what have you. And our main stipulations for selecting those role players is 1 or fewer all-star appearances, no all-NBA, and that's pretty much it.
I love it. Every time, it's succinct, it's the point, it's fun, it's exciting, and I think it'll make for a great show here for you listeners. So yeah, without further ado, Garrett, let's kind of run through each team. I guess, Josh, if you want to kind of run through each of the teams, and then we could start with the first team, Josh, Garrett, myself, and we'll just go around from there.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of tip off this now being a series with 90s teams, because that was a formulative era for most of us. There were just a lot of really interesting duos and one trio that took place in the 90s that were really successful, fascinating case study of how to build teams around those types of players. But like Garrett said, never won the championship. So tonight, or during the day, whenever you're listening to it, it's night for us. Context. But we're going to be talking about Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter duo of the early 90s Portland Trailblazers. Going to talk about Run TMC from the Golden State Warriors. We're going to talk about the Shaq and Penny partnership in Orlando. And then we're going to talk about the Glove and the Rain Man up in Seattle.
Very excited to kind of break into these teams, take a little trip down memory lane for some, and for those who aren't aware, a little bit of an NBA history lesson. But it'll definitely be a lot of fun. So yeah, we kind of have it set in terms of contention, like you said, earliest to more modern times, if you will, at least for this series. So let's start way back at the very beginning. And I know, Josh, you were from the area. I think the reason I wanted to go to start with you for Portland, kind of go into the Portland Blazers from that time and little bit of a retrospective on them before we get going here.
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, so I have a connection to the Blazers, even if I haven't always loved their approach. But this, early 90s, the first few years of the 90s, the Blazers were a ridiculously good team that went to the finals twice, like were very close to getting in a third time, like very competitive team, and they were primarily built around Clyde the Glide Drexler and Terry Porter. And Clyde was one of the most elite transition players I've ever seen. And he had this smoothness to him, which is where the nickname came from, like the glide. Like he had the hops, he had the hang time, but it wasn't at like a ferocious hang time like MJ's. It was like the smooth hang time, hence the glide. And then Terry Porter was basically a modern day point guard back in the like late 80s, early 90s. Like he would, at the time, relative to the time period, a pretty high volume 3-point shooter, and especially like off the dribble and above the break type threes. Like the Terry Porter coming out nowadays would be very much in the mold of like a Dame and that sort of thing. And then, they had a lot of good, like dirty work type players around them. I would argue that the main reason they never quite crested the mountaintop was Russia wouldn't let Arvydas Sabonis come over when the Blazers drafted him. And when he finally did come over, it was after multiple Achilles surgeries that qualified him for a handicap parking sticker. If they had another dynamic player like that, I think there's a chance that there'd be more than one championship trophy in the Blazers' office.
Garrett, do you have anything to add there?
Well, yeah, I mean, beyond just the misfortune about Sabonis that Josh was mentioning, but also just the competition was fierce at that time, right? In 1990, they lost to the bad boy Detroit Pistons, one of the deepest teams, one of the best defensive teams in the history of the league. In 91, they're going up against, they had a great regular season in 91, and, they went up against Magic pretty much in his prime. And then in 92, you're going up against Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. So they faced some pretty stiff competition. And, perhaps if that same team had been around at a different era where, their opponent wasn't an all-time great team, they might have pulled through even without Sabonis.
Yeah, I definitely think they had the talent. I think also by the time, I think it's weird because by the time Sabonis came, he definitely could have, if he came, at this point, 90, like 91, 92 would have been when he was supposed to come, right? Or was it 88?
I think he was drafted in like 86.
86. Oh, so they had that.
86, but yeah. So he should have been able to come in at any point before this 90s setup, but he didn't show up until late 90s, I think. Near the very, very end of the 90s.
Yeah, and it's also, I don't think the early Blazers didn't really have they went to the finals twice. I think you could put their contention window between 89 and 92, 93. After that, injuries really hit Clyde. Even though he was a productive player once he got traded up until he retired, pretty much. They gave him they straight up waived Terry Porter, I think in 94, 95. And at that point, it was Trader Bob. Bob Whitsitt took over and did a swiftly set about dismantling any remnant of that finals contending team back in 1992.
Like he was Corban playing basketball GM. Just trade everybody, start anew.
And start clean. And you're right, sadly. I hate to say it, but in that one way, I wish he hadn't, because I don't know how. Maybe you go, I think Rod Strickland was a weird fit when they had him alongside Terry Porter, because Terry was kind of the primary guy. Rod really couldn't shoot the ball, needed to play on ball. Terry played more of the two, but that was kind of Clyde's position. As he got older, he went more to the three, but you had Jerome Kersey there, and then you had Cliff Robinson as well, and he won the bigger role. So it was definitely different, the dynamic. And that's why you had some weird, weird Blazers teams between 94 and 96 before you finally got that 97 to 2003 Blazers team with Rasheed Wallace and Sabonis and Damon Stoudemire and all of them. So I think if there's one thing to be said, some of it was injuries that kind of curtailed, and Terry Porter did drop off a bit. Like, he definitely became like solid backup point guard after 94, 95, but he still played till like 2003 or 2002. Yeah. And then Clyde, I mean, he was productive up until he retired in 97. So I still think that there was good solid play from them. But they definitely, their peak was quick. They made it, and then they went down. So yeah, that's kind of the Blazers. And this is where we're at right now.
Yeah, but maybe, just maybe, that peak would have reached a little higher to the mountaintop if they had some of the players the three of us think would complement them very well.
I agree. Perfect transition, Josh. Let's get into it. Yeah, we transition king over here, like Clyde in transition or Monte Ellis in transition. Anyways, Garrett, why don't you start with the players you thought, your thought process, your fit, who you decided to put around the Blazers, and then we'll go to Josh and myself.
Okay, so I mean, Corban, you broke it down that that Porter and Drexler were both really good scorers. So I didn't prioritize scoring too much with the three guys that I put around them. I wanted to focus primarily on defense and just some complementary offensive skills. So one thing I also think is pretty important when you have a couple of offensive engines in the likes of Terry Porter and Clyde Drexler is also easing the burden on them defensively as well. So the first guy I thought of that I think would be a great fit, having a great season this year with the Boston Celtics, is Derek White. He can guard multiple positions. He can, if the opposition has a star point guard, he can guard that player. If they have a star, wing player, he can also guard them. Offensively, he can play on and off the ball, which is beneficial. He's, I think, an underrated passer, a guy that, can make some timely cuts, can hit the spot up threes. And is a guy that does a lot of the little things that you want around a couple of star offensive pieces. So we're starting there. And then I also thought that, like, if there was one sort of thing that this team might need a little bit offensively outside of Porter and Drexler is a little bit of a post-up threat. So I also think the team could use some passing as well because, even though Porter and Drexler are decent passers, that's not like their strength. So I went with Boris Diaw as a player that, can post up some mismatches, add some passing, can shoot a little bit. But I thought he would be a really good fit offensively to make this team really, really difficult to guard. And then finally, I think this team needs some shot blocking, some rim protection. So I went with Marcus Camby as my center for this squad.
Wow, that is really solid. Now, like you said, it wasn't prioritizing offense, but complementary talents that fit around the core that we're going with. So really good. Okay, I'm with it.
Yeah, I like that group. I had a somewhat similar concept for the first player that came to mind for me, which is, again, you kind of want to take some of the defensive pressure off of Terry and Clyde, and you want somebody who can open up the floor for them a little bit, somebody who can space. You want an elite point of attack, ideally wing-sized defender who can, like, I love Derek White, but those three together might still struggle against some of the bigger wings. So I actually was looking at guys like OG Anunoby, Shane Battier. Ultimately, I decided on Mikal Bridges because Clyde and Terry can do the majority of the scoring, but you still probably need that third option who can step up when one of those two is getting rest on the bench. And so that's why I went with Mikal Bridges. I think he can slide in with those guys, and he can play a more complementary role when all three of them are on the court at the time. And when, Terry or Clyde go to the bench, Mikal can step up a little bit and play more of a complementary scoring option. I also thought, again, I want more space for these guys because Clyde was an amazing slasher. Like, I want to give him driving lanes. So I wanted a pick and pop big, ideally one who could rebound well and not be super atrocious on defense. And that got me thinking of guys like Terry Mills, who nobody ever talks about Terry Mills, but Terry Mills was so ahead of his time.
I just traded for him in my game.
Of course he did. 38% 3-point shooter for his career. And when you talk about like relative 3-point attempts, like per game in like 96, 97, he took 5 threes a game. Which, as a 6'10" guy, nobody took that many threes a game around that time. I also thought about like Troy Murphy because, again, I want to kind of emphasize rebounds and shooting, and Troy was like killer at rebounding and spacing, but he wasn't quite enough defensively for me. So I went with Maxi Kleber. Not quite the shooter the other two are, but definitely much better defensively. So we have 2 really nice defensive pieces to complement Terry and Clyde. And then finally, I think, again, like Clyde's a slasher. Like, you want to give him opportunities to get to the rim. And Terry, like we said, is kind of a modern point guard who can shoot that off the dribble 3-pointer and that sort of thing. So I wanted a elite screen setting big who can also operate out of handoffs with either of those 2 guys, or Mikal Bridges when one of them is on the bench. And ideally, again, somebody who's defensively helpful. So I was thinking Steven Adams, maybe somebody like Isaiah Hartenstein, who's kind of filling the same type of role for the Knicks right now and has been killing it so far this year. Shout out to Isaiah Hartenstein. I also was thinking about somebody like Marcin Gortat, who is an elite pick and roll man that like no one remembers, no one talks about, but was like one of the best screen setters, a really good handoff guy at the time, and a fantastic roll man. Not like a vertical spacer, but somebody who almost always created good opportunities out of the roll. Ultimately, I went with my guy Steven Adams because I think he sets the best screens I've ever seen set. On top of it, I think he has a little bit more of a handoff game than Gortat. And I trust him more as a rebounder than Hartenstein at the moment. So my 3, Mikal Bridges, Maxi Kleber, and Steven Adams.
I like it. I, to the surprise of no one, went into a different direction. Looked at, Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter. I saw the way they played. I was like, you know what they need? More spacing, more shooting, more offense, right? So I tried, and mind you, no disrespect to the guys that end up playing with the wingmen that end up playing with both Porter and Drexler. It was Buck. Oh my gosh, why can't I remember his last name now?
Williams?
Buck Williams, thank you. Buck Williams and Jerome Kersey. But I just didn't think, even for the 90s, they didn't really space the floor that well. Jerome Kersey would shoot a bit, and I guess they both were good from like 15 feet and in. But I just think, Clyde Drexler loved to shoot the 3. If you look at his numbers, it wasn't until later in his career that he actually was good at shooting the 3. He was just somebody that wanted to get on. Like, he took quite a bit, but was not a good efficient. The only guy who was like an efficient shooter from outside was Terry Porter. Clyde Drexler from like 20 feet and was better, but from 3, considering how much he wanted to shoot the 3 ball, wasn't super great. So that was why I went with more spacing on my squad. So for his career, 31% 3-point shooter, which you don't really think about Clyde Drexler, but he was taking them from the time he entered the NBA, and But yes, who I went with first. I wanted a wing that could kind of bang a little bit. Didn't need and that's kind of when went with all these guys. A wing who could bang a little bit, defensively was somewhat versatile, could at least make offense in terms of capitalizing on shots that were opened up for him from penetration from Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter. He wasn't making his own offense, but that wasn't his job. And so I went with PJ Tucker. Thought he was somebody mobile, especially, early career PJ Tucker. He could play up just because he's big and stocky and just strong, but you would see him guard the Kevin Durant's, right? Up until like 3 years ago, you would see him guard your star wing players, your LeBron James, all of them. So I went with PJ Tucker. Then with the bigger guy who would space the floor, I thought would do pick and pop really well. Could do pick and roll, wasn't really his game, but he was a guy who shot 36% from three and definitely took a bunch of them over his 11-year career, and that was Patrick Patterson. Again, just solid guy, stocky, big, get some rebounds, space the floor. That's really it. Then I went with the predecessor to that archetype, a guy who's, again, just like you mentioned, Josh, being ahead of his time. And we talked about him before, and he's always factors into any historical rebuild, any game I play, anything. Sam Perkins. I went with him at center because he's somebody that definitely he could shoot the ball, shot the ball really well, shot it early, in the 90s as far as somebody who was a stretch big, but he had a polished low post game and he could rebound the ball and he wasn't bad running the floor either. And so I think he's someone there that can kind of play with them in transition, whether it is, transition threes, whether it is, playing off the pick and roll. You can have good corners action between him and Patrick Patterson, PJ Tucker spacing in the corner, Clyde Drexler on one part, and then you Terry Porter on the other. It's definitely more offensively skewed. This is my personality, but I wanted guys that could at least pretend to be two-way. And in this exercise for me, everyone that I picked for matching around both Clyde and Terry were all part of solid defenses, at least schematically. Even if they weren't great individual defenders, maybe only great individual defender I have is PJ Tucker, but both Sam Perkins and Patrick Patterson were on really good defensive teams over the course of their careers. So yeah, that was my impassioned argument for more offense around Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter.
It's interesting though, because you did get some shooting in there, but you did essentially go with like three bigs around those two guys. So you do have some size, even though you don't have like a traditional center in there.
Yeah, and what's funny is I was going to put for my three
and all three bigs solid defenders.
All three solid defenders, yeah. In fact, the one I was going to put to play the three alongside them was Trey Murphy. Not Troy, Trey. But I thought PJ Tucker a little more versatile defensively. And, I mean, I want offense around Clyde and Terry, but they don't need the outsized offense that Trey could potentially bring at the lack of defense compared to a PJ Tucker, who, is a 4 and a 5, but also a 3 because of his size. But, I definitely was looking more in that way with those guys. So, yeah. So one more time, just before we close it out, Garrett, Josh, and then myself, for the Blazers, you're starting 5. Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter, and?
I've got Terry Porter at point, Derek White at shooting guard, Clyde Drexler at the 3, Boris Diaw at power forward, and Marcus Camby at the 5.
Solid.
And I've got Terry Porter, Clyde Drexler, Mikal Bridges, Maxi Kleber, and Steven Adams.
Okay. And then I have Terry Porter at the 1, Clyde at the 2, PJ Tucker at the 3, Patrick Patterson at the 4, and Sam Perkins at the 5. I like it. 3 similar yet totally different philosophies with really unique rosters. That's what I love about this so much. But moving on from the Blazers at a brisk pace to the Run TMC Golden State Warriors. Who wants to break this squad down?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think this team had had the most success in the 1991 season, where they had that shocking upset defeating the San Antonio Spurs in the first round before losing to Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference semifinals. But, Run TMC, if you've never heard that before, it stands for Tim, Mitch, and Chris, which is Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, Chris Mullin. Those 3 guys were 3 of the best offensive players in the league at their position at that time. So they were clearly a very explosive offensive unit. They were coached by the legendary Don Nelson, who, decided that, my best players are offensive guys, so we're going to lean all the way in on offense. even if that means we're going to play like shooting guards at the power forward spot, we're going to do it. So they didn't have a ton of defense there. And that, I think, ultimately was what sort of did them in. And then, beyond that 91 season, I think shortly after that, the following year, Tim Hardaway tore his ACL. And I don't think the three of them ever really had a fully healthy run after that. But for their time, it was absolutely a joy to watch. They played a really fun brand of basketball. And the three of those guys also had very different styles in how they succeeded on the offensive end of the ball. And they also had a guy off the bench in Sarunas Marciulionis that was kind of a slasher type that also brought a sort of different style of play, almost like a little bit of like a Manu Ginobili before Manu came into the league.
I like that. As Josh points to his hero in his mind, one of the best shooting guards of all time. I'm just kidding. He is one of the best shooting guards of all time. Manu Ginobili.
Okay, I was gonna say,
Josh, any thoughts?
In my opinion, Manu is one. But no, yeah, like the fun thing about this team is you've got these three players who are all 3-level scorers. All of them are like extremely dangerous in transition. And they had a coach in Don Nelson who gave up the reins. He basically had a rule where, like, if you're not screwing up, I'm not going to call plays. Like, I want you guys to play free. I want you to push the pace. I want you guys to, like, be decision makers on the court. And then when you screw up, I'll call a timeout and I'll start calling some plays. And you had Tim Hardaway, like Garrett mentioned, they all kind of had slightly different styles in terms of the offensive impact that they had, even though they were kind of similar in terms of the actual offensive impact overall. But you had Tim Hardaway, who, in my opinion, still has the greatest crossover ever, the UTEP two-step, a.k.a. the killer cross. Mitch Richmond, who was like an athletic marvel, but was an applied athletic marvel where like he used that athleticism very well to be the type of like destructive scorer that he was. And then Chris Mullin
had a nice post game as a guard.
Yes, he did. And then Chris Mullin, who he had a couple of seasons where the numbers weren't great, but he was an elite shooter. Somebody who teams really feared shooting the ball. So all three kind of also had that nice synergy where there was some overlap between all three, but not so much that it was kind of a your turn, my turn, his turn type thing. They were able to kind of work collectively. And like Garrett said, it was just a blast to watch. The one downside is outside of, pretty good steals numbers for all three, you wouldn't call any of them particularly good defenders necessarily. Like solid maybe, but not like strong defenders in my opinion. I know Garrett maybe disagrees with me. I just don't think any of them would be like tops of your list for like a defensive team type thing. But like Garrett alluded to, that team just didn't have enough defense around those three to help them get to where they needed to get. And like, I love, Manute Bol, but Manute Bol wasn't doing it. They did have a chance to get Dikembe Mutombo once, but that didn't play out either. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll just mention, and I agree mostly, Josh, in terms of like the fact that the three of those, if you talk about them as a trio, yeah, not a ton of defense. I will say I think Mitch Richmond is very underrated as a defensive player. He's not like, an all defensive level guy, but I think Michael Jordan was even quoted as saying like he was the toughest guy to go against, like talking about on offense and defense. And he had a lot of strength. Even though he didn't have like a ton of size, but a strong guy, and you already mentioned pretty good athlete as well. So I think he was a good defender. But yeah, when you're next to a couple of guys, especially a guy like Mullin, who was really limited on that end, if you're not like an elite guy, it probably doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that Mitch Richmond in general it was underrated, right? Like one of the great shooting guards of the '90s, but really like one of the great shooting guards. Like, yeah, he's not one that immediately comes to mind, but you look at, you know, had the misfortune of playing on some really bad teams. I think after Run TMC, you know, went to a Sacramento squad where, you know, kind of toiled in mediocrity for years, and they finally made the playoffs. And they went to Washington, toiled in mediocrity for years, and then they finally, you know, they were still bad. They finally let him go. He finished his career, I think, in Los Angeles, if I remember. He went out with a ring, which was great. By that point, like, he was done. You know what I mean? So, like, you know, he just spent most of his prime on squads that just weren't very good, and put up good numbers on bad teams. And I don't think it was any knock on him. It just happened to be the situation that he was on, you know? But yeah, underrated, I think, multifaceted shooting guard. Like one of the great guards that really isn't talked about. Now, I know he's kind of like the barometer for the Hall of Fame, which I think is hilarious. Oh, they were better than Rich Richmond, like, you know, but I definitely want to give him some love there.
Well, and one more point in terms of like what Josh was talking about in terms of that the three of them had good synergy is we got to bring up that Chris Mullin was that off-ball shot creator. I think that's a big part of it. If you've got three guys that are scorers, you know, having a couple of guys in your backcourt that are more on ball, having Mullin as well that can run off screens, spot up, and score just, you know, in transition as well, just with catch and shoots, you know, was really beneficial to the three of them being able to all put up points and all contribute while playing at the same time.
That's a fair point. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. That's an excellent point here.
Well said.
And something I think, joking aside, behind the scenes, I am yucking it up, but like something I think the important point that you brought up, Garrett, is again, it was a good exploration of how they got their offense, right? And the value of that in terms of opening up for that to make Run TMC happen. Otherwise, he could have had a lot of teams in the 90s. We're not, no one's talking about the 91 Denver Nuggets, right? Like the Paul Westhead Denver Nuggets. But like you said, it's the value of having that. So no, I definitely think that's the point. So with that, yeah, let's get started. I guess I'll go first on this one. I feel like I leaned offense in all of these, which does Run TMC really need more offense? Maybe not, but here we are. So I tried though to go with offensive players or guys who brought value offensively, that didn't need, like, they brought value offensively, so they hit my quota, but they could at least defend their position, if not more. So I went with I have Tim Hardaway, point guard, Mitch Richmond, 2 guard. Now, this is where things get funky. I have Chris Mullin at the 3 or the 4. And then I was having a tough time between Robert Horry and Danny Green. Ultimately, I ended up going with Robert Horry. Although I really wanted Danny Green just because Robert Horry plays the 4. Like, he could play the 3 and the 4, especially if you got mid-90s, early Lakers Robert Horry. By the time he was the Lakers, Rick Fox is small forward. But anyway, if you got like mid-90s Robert Horry, when he was playing with the Rockets, he was listed as small forward, but at 6'10", 220, whatever, he could play the 4, right? And so I have him there, someone who, again, stretches the floor, could make shots. Early in his career, could do a little bit more offensively, but was someone who could defend his position capably, right? With a solid defensive player. Danny Green didn't make the cut just because he was a little smaller. And that was really it. I would have wanted him in place of where Tim or Mitch or Chris is, but they all got to be bumped up a position. Didn't really know how I felt about Mitch playing the 3 if I had Danny there, because then Chris would play the 4, and Tim has to be a point guard. Like, he's going to defend point guard. So that was the concept of trying to fit in between this structure here. So Robert Horry made the cut at 4. Then at 5, I was thinking, I'm like, you know what? Like, if you look at Don Nelson teams, they didn't really have big bruising 5s, right? Like, it was a guy, run the floor, set out screens if you can space the floor, or, due to the rules in the early to mid-90s, the implied spacing of the floor with his own defensive rules, that'd be great. So I want Miles Turner. There's a guy, again, stretches the floor, plays defense. He's a rim deterrent, more of a rim deterrent than they had. Like, no disrespect to Tom Tolbert, but, you have someone there in Miles Turner who can do a little bit better job there, but he's also someone who can run the floor with these guys, right? And I think that's good. Set good screens, play off of that, And I think it opens up different actions between Hardaway and Richmond and Mullin and Turner to bring the most out of him. And it's not like Turner can't do anything off of a post up. Like, he's not a post up guy. You just give it to him and let him, quote unquote, go to work. But he can take advantage of that, if he's on a mismatch. And I think that could happen with a team that has guys like Hardaway, Richmond, and Mullin ready to take you off the dribble. So ultimately, I went with Tim Hardaway Jr., Mitch Richmond at the 2, Chris Mullin at the 3, Robert Horry at the 4, Miles Turner at the 5. My honorable mention / tough cuts were Danny Green, and then just for pure offensive sake, Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah, I will say, like, in terms of, I think as you said, you're maximizing the offense there. You're giving those 3 stars plenty of space and room to operate, which is good for them. I do feel like defense is still going to be lacking with that team, even as decent of a rim protector as Miles Turner is, and also defensive rebounding. I don't think that's going to be a strength of that 5 either.
You know what? I hadn't actually. The defense in my mind, as you were saying that, I'm typing, but think of the offense. But defensive rebounding was something I gotta say I did not consider as well as I should have, especially considering, he wasn't a very good rebounder, Robert Horry, and Miles Turner for his size is like, So yeah, I kind of agree. Like, Mitch Richmond can get in there. Chris Mullin can get some rebounds. Like, go to work, y'all. At least grab a rebound to get off the break. But no, I agree with you. That's something I probably should have put more of thought process into, more evaluation into, because the rebounding something, you're right. Like, yikes, Shaggy.
Josh, did you want to say yours next?
Sure. Yeah, I like the concept, Corban, but I agree with Garrett that, like, I'd want a little more rebounding. And part of that is these guys were at their most dangerous in transition. So my goal is to improve that defense while increasing transition opportunities. So I'm looking for, defensive chaos agents that create deflections, create steals, block shots, get defensive rebounds and outlet and push. And so I actually thought about Robert Horry as an option. But there were 2 players I thought were more interesting for that than Horry. One was Andre Kirilenko, who is the definition of a defensive chaos agent, and I think would fit in very well with these guys. But I ultimately went with another person, Robert Covington, because I feel like Robert Covington brings more spacing than Andre Kirilenko does. And so I think Robert Covington can be the 4 for this team and can, help the team defense. He sometimes, he could do point of attack defense, but I think he was always much more impactful, being essentially the team defense's free safety, for lack of a better term. But I think he could improve their overall team defense while generating more transition opportunities, and he can space when they are in the half court. And then the other way to create transition opportunities is to rebound more, right? So I wanted a really strong rebounder who is also a rim deterrent and who isn't necessarily going to be gunning for a lot of shots, because let's be honest, you're not going to get them with these 3 guys. Not that they were unwilling passers, but just like the volume of shots these guys are taking. So I thought of somebody like an Emeka Okafor, who is another guy, really solid. No one ever talks about him, but strong rebounder, good screen setter, a rim deterrent, even if not like an elite one. But then the guy came to me, Clint Capella, fantastic screener who would work with all 3 of these guys very well in that situation. Amazing rim protector and rebounder. So for me, I went with Tim Hardaway at the 1, Mitch Richmond at the 2, Chris Mullin at the 3, Robert Covington at the 4, and Clint Capella at the 5.
I like that. Solid.
Yeah, so I I took a similar approach in terms of what you were talking about, Josh, in terms of like igniting transition opportunities, and I focused almost exclusively on blocking shots. So my first pick is going to be Evan Mobley, and my thought there is the run TMC, they all can shoot, right? So if we have one non-shooter on the floor, that's not that big of an issue. But what Mobley does provide is, of course, the defense, not only with the rim protection, but he also can be a guy, I think, that while the Cavs haven't utilized him a lot in these scenarios, but a guy that you can throw on elite wings to defend. So he can act as both a guy that can defend the opposition's wing stars and can be a rim deterrent. And then on the offensive end, you want to have a couple of bigs out there to set screens for Chris Mullin off the ball. You're running a lot of pick and rolls with the likes of Tim Hardaway and Mitch Richmond. So wanted to have a couple of guys that can set screens. So my second guy, another shot blocker, but also a guy that can do that and space the floor, is Brook Lopez. So I'm going with Mobley and Lopez, getting a ton of size, a ton of shot blocking, because, again, that run TMC team is going to give up a lot of penetration to the basket, so you need multiple rim protectors to maintain even an okay offense. And hopefully you get those positive loops where you get a shot block, and that gets the team out and running. And you still got four shooters with Lopez, and then Mobley as the guy that can be in the dunker's spot or a guy setting screens.
That's interesting.
I
guess I'm not totally sold on Mobley guarding perimeter players potentially, like more than like switch action. Like the potential's there, but I don't know. I guess that'll be my one thought process. And like him, but you had Brook Lopez. I was gonna say, like, at first when you brought him up, like, I don't know about all that. But then Brook Lopez there is like, it doesn't even really matter. Like, he's definitely someone there. Offensively, I do wonder like what Mobley does. Just because like that's his weakness now, and like he doesn't space in theory space the floor, but he doesn't space the floor. He's not doing a whole lot when you do have, the run TMC crew there. And also defense will know that because they know that now. So it's not like they're like even treating him like a threat. Because he's just like, we saw how he was in the playoffs with the Knicks. Like in general, like he has the potential there, but it's not come together offensively. So that would be my biggest concern.
I mean, I think the issue that you saw with Mobley in the playoffs was like playing with another center in Jarrett Allen. So when he caught the ball, on the short roll, say the Knicks blitz the likes of Garland and Mitchell, Mobley gets a 4-on-3. He's got Allen's man at the rim, Mitchell Robinson, there to stop him from getting all the way to the basket. He's got a pass to the corner, but that might be Isaac Okoro, right? Whereas in this situation, there's no defender at the basket because Brook Lopez is spotted up behind the three-point line. There's no weak shooter, so there's no one that they're leaving like the Knicks left Isaac Okoro either, because you're not giving up a wide open shot to Chris Mullin or Mitch Richmond or Tim Hardaway. So I think a lot of the issues we saw from Mobley in the playoffs last year is much more context dependent. And this is going to be an ecosystem that is perfect for his skill set because he can handle it. He can pass and he can finish when, you don't have a 7-footer there at the rim to stop him.
That's fair. No, when you brought up, Isaac Okoro and Jarrett Allen, it drew. Maybe I was drawing too much from that team specific context in that. So no, I definitely see what you mean and can agree there for sure. So yeah, let's one more time before we go into the next team. Let's run through the run TMC crew. So I'll just I'll start here. I have, of course, Tim Hardaway at the point guard position, Mitch Richmond playing the 2, Chris Mullin at the 3, Robert Horry at the 4, Miles Turner at the 5. Let's get 50 games.
I have Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, Chris Mullin on the perimeter with Robert Covington and Clint Capella up front with them.
All right, I had Tim Hardaway at point, Mitch Richmond at shooting guard, Chris Mullin at small forward. Then I had Evan Mobley at power forward and Brooke Lopez at center.
There we go. I like it. Solid as always here. So let's go into the 95 Magic. I will be happy to go about them. I argued so passionately about them over the last couple of shows to make the cut here, which, yes, a derivative of Shaq Kobe. I get it, but I also think it's totally different. Derivative, same, but no. So what we get here, I think with the 95 Magic, I know I'm messing around. We all wanted Shaq Penny, but I wanted them more than Rick Smits and Reggie Miller, and I stand by that. But anyways, going to the 95 Magic, what was different in my mind for this is you obviously have a younger Shaquille O'Neal, right? But somebody who was much more mobile. I mean, the Shaq, Kobe, Lakers, you still had a Shaq who could run down the floor. Mind you, being 7'1", 300 pounds and moving at all like that is just a marvel in general. So I don't like to say like Shaq overweight, like he wasn't moving. Like just to be as big as he was in general and still get down the floor was great. But the Shaq you had in the 90s with the Magic was a monster that was like he was dominant, he was huge, but he was quick, like a gazelle quick, you know, and you run the floor, you look at the early highlights, he could lead the break. Didn't necessarily want that, but he was someone that could do that. You had a great spacer. Well, I'll talk about, I'm gonna talk about the other guys first. You had a great spacer in Dennis Scott. He came in the league as a shooter, kind of a little bit more one-dimensional, and you know, he had some later in his career, just like weight issues, but like in the moment, like when he was playing in the moment, like with the 94-95, he was a guy who was like a stretch big. I would say he was a small forward, but 6'8", good size, boom. You had Nick Anderson, who before Penny was the Magic's like crown jewel. He was their first round draft pick, came into the league more as a slasher, turned himself into a really good shooter about just before the finals came around. Really solid defensively. He was routinely put on the other player's best or other team's best perimeter player. We saw what he did on Jordan in the Eastern Conference Finals in 95. Just a really solid player. Then, this team was solid, but at power forward, you had Horace Grant. And at 93, 94, the Magic were kind of going through different players. You had Larry Krystowiak. I think I said that right. Former NCAA coach, a solid four, but just a serviceable working kind of power forward. You had Jeff Turner, who was a stretch big. Another guy kind of ahead of his time. I put Pat Garrity as like just the guys. They were like the Ryan Anderson like archetypes in my mind of guys who just stretched the floor and did a very good job of that. But when Horace Grant came, you had someone who really brought the power and power forward. Solid, came up of age with those early 90s Bulls with that first three-peat, obviously known for the goggles, but was a really good rebounder, had a really good perimeter jump shot, like 16 feet and in, was really solid there. And I thought he played well off of Shaq, which like in modern times now, you might want someone, opening up the floor a little bit more, but Horace Grant was really good there. And he was the adult in the room for this young team. And then lastly, Penny Hardaway. And I love Penny Hardaway. Ahead of his time, you got a lot of comparisons to Magic Johnson, but I think he'd be a really good point forward now. I'm not sure what archetype I would put him as. Like I was trying to think of like a professional player now that like fits Penny Hardaway, and I just didn't draw one. Maybe you or Garrett, Josh, can come up with one over the course of this. But you had a guy 6'7", great court vision. He had a really strong post-up game for a guy that was kind of lean, but he could take, if you were a smaller guard, he could take you down the post, had a nice hook shot, had some moves down low. Wasn't the best shooter. Wasn't the best shooter consistently from three, but he could definitely shoot the ball as well. And he had great chemistry with Shaq. You're talking about a guy who's 6'7", coming in, can easily see over the top of the defense, can run in transition. And the only thing that really messed him up, honestly, was the knee injuries he had later in his career. I think 90, he had some in 95, 96, but like 97, 98, 2001, 2002, and he still carved himself out like a good 12-year career, but he was really only super effective for about 6 or 7 of those. Mostly all of his Orlando time and then parts of his early part with Phoenix before kind of bouncing around due to injury. So that was that 94, 95 Magic team. They really caught lightning in a bottle, I want to say, in 95 because they kind of all gelled together. You had Scott, and Hardaway and Scott and Anderson in roles that worked for them. No ego really among that team there. Penny was playing amazing. Shaq was really coming into his own. Horace Grant, 31, was still in the prime of his career, and they went on a great run all the way up until game one, an epic collapse, some missed free throws, some raucous threes, out with the dustpan, and then the next year, unfortunately, between injuries and a way to really fumble the bag from a free agency perspective for the Orlando Magic front office, you ended the dynasty before it ever really started. So that was my thoughts on the Magic. And real quick, I'm gonna let you, Garrett, you threw out a comp. I am interested in. I know we don't really talk too much about player comps, and I know Josh had a thought there, but I really want to put a perspective of a guy just to think about for context for Penny Hardaway. I mean, you could just YouTube him and look at the highlights there and draw your own conclusions, but like, for someone who he was kind of unique. I don't want to say he was a unique player because people compare to Magic Johnson, like that was back then, and I definitely don't see it as much just because you're 6'7", 6'8", and can pass is great, but like different types of game. But that was why I was going to go for a comp there. But bottom line, I've already spent at least 8 minutes talking about this Magic team. I loved it. I love the uniforms. I thought they were destined to win at least one championship. I thought they ended too soon. I thought they had a really good ESPN documentary, One Magic Moment, or This Magic Moment, with Shaq and Penny. Highly recommend that. And that's all I got.
Yeah, my comp, it's not super clean or anything, but how about like pre-injury Shawn Livingston with a jumper? Because Livingston could post up some, like prior to that devastating knee injury, was a really, really good fluid athlete. Again, a similar size, I think, to what Penny Hardaway was at around 6'7". So that would be the closest one. But yeah, there's not too many players that are like Penny. He was pretty unique. And yeah, like what you brought up with that 95 team, it seemed to really gel. I think the pieces fit. And it's funny because like this is maybe spoiling what I'm about to do in terms of what players I picked. But like I think the guys that were on that 95 team around Shaq and Penny were pretty ideal. And I think a big part of the reason why they didn't succeed was they didn't get multiple years to try it. In 96, Horace Grant gets hurt and they lose in the conference finals. And then beyond that, they have the injuries to Penny and then Shaq obviously leaving for LA. I thought, if that team would have been given the time, I think that could have really gelled into something special that would have gotten there. So, yeah, I think it was largely youth and inexperience, I think, that really did them in, at least in that 95 NBA Finals against the Rockets.
And I would agree there, Garrett.
I completely agree as well. Like, I think this is the team, which is interesting because, like, the Blazers went to 2 finals, but I feel like this core, this Shaq Penny core, is probably the core out of these 4 that was the most likely to actually win a championship if they had stayed together. And again, you have 2 really unique players. Like, you both have kind of talked about the uniqueness of Shaq. I mentioned in our chat that Shaq is like the elite pro athlete version of Chris Farley, like massive, but so freaking fluid and agile. Like to the point that it boggles your mind. You're like, I don't understand how Chris Farley can high kick as much as he can, or like how Shaq is moving at that size the way he is. And then Penny, like Garrett mentioned, you just don't find a whole lot of players that size with that combination of skills that Penny had. And you get both kind of mentioned, injuries happened, inexperience. I think that might be the worst free agent fumble of all time. Because like Shaq, I think, would have come back if you had just offered him the max. But they offered him below the max to bring him back. And this was after Shaq, when Shaq came in as like a rookie. Shaq came in as like the most entertaining and like the most hyped, I think, player since MJ in terms of like how much everybody just, not just like on the court stuff, but like his media presence and like how he interacted with people and stuff. Like, I think he was the most magnetic player who had come out since MJ, basically. And they just totally were like, we'll give you some money, but like we don't want to give you too much money. And like, no, you throw the bank vault at this guy, you throw the bank vault at young Shaq. And yeah, I agree with Garrett. I think the team around them was structured pretty well. I think there were a few tweaks that we're obviously going to get into that would have taken them further. But yeah, like one of the more entertaining duos that I can recall. And like Corban said, all time like jerseys, like logo design, like that era Magic. Oh, so good.
Chef's kiss. Absolutely. No, 100% agree there. So yeah, let's kind of get into it from here. Like I said, this is actually an interesting one. We all kind of pointed out this team as constructed worked really well. Like Garrett said, like Josh said, other factors were why, they didn't come together in the way that we might have wanted to see an extended, run at it, where they really had what, if you want to count, I don't really count 94, but 94, 95, 96, and that was really it. And each time in the playoffs, really underwhelming finishes, whether getting swept in the finals or getting swept by Chicago in the playoffs, like not super great there. But yeah, let's kind of talk about how we would at least upgrade or what we would do differently. Who hasn't gone first in this? Not that it really matters, but I definitely want to kind of.
I think Josh.
There we go, Josh. There we are. Yes.
All right, so we mentioned how both these players were unique, and if you think about it as a defense, as a defense going against this duo, how exhausted are you as a relatively normal sized point guard having to deal with Penny? Pretty exhausted, right?
Kind of a deal, yeah.
How exhausted is everybody dealing with Shaq? So
also true.
My goal is to add more spacing around these guys, really ratchet up the defense, and I wanted to get guys that really also exhausted the opponents. So I wanted 3 types of defenders. I wanted a point of attack defender. In all of these, I want them ideally with size, because the other thing that we note, Shaq's huge. Penny's huge for his role. Why not play into that and have just a massive team? So I wanted a point of attack 3-and-D guy. I wanted a help 3-and-D guy. And I wanted a big wing point of attack 3-and-D guy. So for the point of attack guy, there were a couple guys who came to mind. So like I've mentioned Lonzo Ball before in the past NBA Hold'em. I think he'd fit in really well here, especially like juicing up the transition opportunities for these guys. But I like 2 other players more. One, Garrett's already mentioned, Derek White, I think would be a fantastic fit next to Penny in the backcourt. But the guy I ultimately went with was Alex Caruso, because again, I want to freaking exhaust the opponents. Like, not only do you have to guard Penny Hardaway on one end, you're being guarded by Alex Caruso on the other. Like, you're in for a rough night.
Off night, long night.
Yes. And Caruso's at 37% career from 3 on over 750 3-pointers, which is when 3-point field goal percentage tends to like average out and like actually be somewhat predictive. For the help in 3D guy, again, I've thought about like somebody like Robert Ory. But again, I come back to Robert Covington because again, Covington is just that defensive chaos agent who's going to get those deflections, those steals, basically help be that elite help defender that Horace Grant was, but to an even bigger extent in terms of also being able to space for them on beyond the mid-range. Horace was a very good mid-range shooter. And then for the big point of attack guy, I was thinking of maybe somebody like Shane Battier, somebody who doesn't really care about the touches, but is going to, be a tireless defender. I was thinking about Mikal Bridges, but again, I want to exhaust the opponents. So I went with OG Anunoby. So my team, my lineup, you're an opponent, and you see the starting lineup against you is Penny Hardaway at point guard, Alex Caruso at 2, Robert Covington or OG Anunoby. Doesn't really matter where you slot them, 3 or 4, and then Shaq at the 5. That's a night you were going to be exhausted in the fourth quarter. You're going to be beat down by these guys. And that's kind of what I was going for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to suggest that just with Shaq and Penny alone, that's still going to be a pretty good offense. But I think your strategy was mostly maybe this team won't be quite as good on offense as that 95 Magic squad, but significantly better on the defensive end. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yes, but I factored in that this is going to juice the transition opportunities for that team too.
Yeah.
And as we all know, the worst transition team in the league has a better points per possession than the very best half-court team is in the league. So while we might not have that Nick Anderson third scorer type necessarily, we're going to be generating more transition opportunities. So I feel like it'll even out. Plus, I think the big goal here is by the fourth quarter, it's going to be really hard for teams to hang with these guys. After being hounded by Caruso and OG Anunoby, with Covington being the help defender, and then you have Shaq and Penny as well to deal with on defense. And also, those guys weren't terrible defenders themselves. By the fourth quarter, the opposing team is going to be really struggling. And I think at that point, you have Shaq, you have Penny, and you have spacing around them, and you're getting transition opportunities. I think you're probably going to be good enough offensively to pull it out.
That's solid. I definitely think it's interesting. Like you said, you're kind of keying in on that defense, keying in on making it, a rough night there. I also was thinking about Garrett, it seemed like you're taking maybe a step back offensively, but hearing you explain that, I guess it doesn't make sense on how you would then compensate using those chaos agents from the defensive side of the ball to create offense for the core. So I definitely kind of get where you're coming from. Definitely an interesting way of doing that for sure.
Well, yeah. Should I go with mine now?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right. So my strategy was more to keep the offense at about the same level that it was and maybe just try to slightly improve the defense. I definitely didn't improve the defense as much as Josh did. But so the first guy that I went with, and, Nick Anderson, a lot of people, if they're not familiar, was more than just a spot up guy. He could post up, he could do some self-creation stuff. So I wanted to maintain that. So I went with a guy that has really built up his self-creation skills in the last couple of years, and that's Desmond Bane. A guy that elite shooter. Penny and Shaq are going to draw doubles, so you need guys that are going to hit open shots, and then also you want a guy also that can take some of that offensive burden away from Shaq and Penny. As good as those two guys are, you don't want them using every possession because you still want them to have some energy on the defensive end. The next guy is another, Dennis Scott was an elite spot up shooter. So I wanted another guy that was an elite spot up shooter, but I felt like I could get that and upgrade because Scott was not the best of defenders. So I went with Trey Murphy III here. Finally, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to make an argument here that having a elite mid-range shooter with Shaq at the 4 is actually better than having an elite three-point shooter with Shaq at the 4. So I'm going with Horace Grant. I'm sticking with the exact power forward that this team had. And my argument as to why is because when you catch the ball at, say, the elbow, where Horace Grant was, pretty automatic from there, it's a lot easier to make those post-entry passes into Shaquille O'Neal, whether he's being fronted and you have to throw that ball over the top, or if he does a quick duck in and you've got to make that pass really quickly before the defender can get to three-quarter and try to knock it away. So I like the fact that, like, you can have a guy where that pass is a lot easier to make. I think Horace Grant was a solid passer, another reason why he was a good fit next to Shaq. And also, at times, you might even see Shaq garner so much attention that if Horace Grant notices his man shades a little bit to try to stop the pass, then Horace Grant is one dribble away from getting to the rim and taking advantage of his man, putting too much attention on his teammate there. So I think, like, given that my 1 through 3 spots are all elite 3-point shooters, and then you've got an elite mid-range guy that can make those entries into Shaq, I think it works really well offensively.
That's solid. I think that's interesting. I like that we're kind of went bold in different directions here with the makeup around this squad. And in some cases went bold by staying the same, Garrett, in terms of keeping Horace Grant. So I like that. I definitely went a little different, as I feel like I say it every time I go. But as good as Penny was at the 1, my favorite iteration of Penny was as a playmaking 2 alongside a more ball dominant guy in Stephon Marbury in those early 2000s Phoenix Suns. I just thought it was really cool for someone to, take, or even backcourt 2000, if you like that, with him and Jason Kidd. I didn't, because I wanted more offense at my point guard spot. But in this case, it's kind of a hybrid between backcourt 2000 and basically Penny at the 2. Not yet, actually. So I was going to I had half a mind for one of my favorite players on this team, but I couldn't do it with a straight face, so I decided not to. But I did decide to move Penny Hardaway to the 2 and do a supersized lineup with spacing, but with length. So I have Penny Hardaway at the 2. I have Shaq at the 5. I have early career. We're talking 2000, like 2003. No, I probably should go 2005, 2006. Lamar Odom.
I'm confused, though, because if you're going supersized, why wouldn't Penny be at the 1?
Well, because I don't. Okay, so let me say the other guys I have here. So I have Lamar Odom at point, quote unquote. I had Trey Murphy, but I subbed him out for Hedo Turkoglu. And then I have Jaren Jackson Jr. And the reason why, as you can see, is I got bigger guys. I have some spacing with Hedo Turkoglu. Now, defensively, I'm kind of weird on that, but I also have Shaq and I have Jaren Jackson. So I'm not too worried. It wasn't like Hedo was a horrible defender. He just wasn't like a great defender, right? But he was on some Stan Van Gundy defensive teams. With the Orlando Magic, they weren't leaned on further defense, but they got it together when they had to, right? And I thought he was solid there. I thought Lamar Odom as someone who defensively could kind of switch, be a lot of cross matching, but defensively he was solid. We saw what he could do. Wasn't the best shooter. I want him more on ball, but his vision was good. When he came in, they thought, wasn't the case, but he was looked at as like someone who could be a point guard. He definitely played as a point forward in lineups for years. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. is someone with additional length who I think could do a little better. Do a good job switching. And he's not your sole rim protector. You still have Shaq in the back. Guys who I wanted to put in there, Trey Murphy was somebody I really wanted to slot in. But I was on the fence. And then once the site was selected, I was like, I'm just not going to put him in. And then Tim Thomas was another guy I was fond of, but just didn't make sense to put him in outside of me wanting Tim Thomas there. But the reason why, to go back to why Penny's playing the 2, because Lamar Odom can't really play the 2. Like, in my mind, they both, Lamar Odom can play the 2, but they both are kind of point forwards, if you will. And for my brain to make sense of it, Penny's played the 2. He can swing between point guard through small forward. I feel like Lamar Odom has done it, but like he's really like small forward, power forward, who can play point guard. Jaren Jackson at the 4 because where else? And then Hedo Turkoglu at the 3. I guess Hedo could be your supersized 2. It was definitely a funky lineup, but yeah. Listen, some guys are weird in position. I've maybe played too much 2K.
to be honest, Penny Hardaway is your point guard with this roster. I feel like it's pretty obvious.
He is
point guard,
but like I like Lamar Odom's distribution skills. I like Hugh Turkle's like yes, Penny is the point guard, but like nominally speaking, right? Like I want him. I don't know. I guess you're right. Maybe I overthought this one too much. Like you get where I'm coming from though, right? Like yes, he's the point guard.
I appreciate the approach. Like I get where you're coming, and
it's like any LeBron James team with the point guard where LeBron's really the point guard.
Yeah, like again, you were coming at it from the perspective of you appreciated Penny's game most when he was working with other ball handlers, other kind of like playmakers. So like I get the desire to put him more into that role as opposed to just like the on-ball point guard, end-all, be-all. So yeah, no, I get where you're coming from.
It's a different look. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. It's definitely a different look. This is one of my more bolder lineups for sure. But ultimately, I thought defensively is just enough. Shooting-wise, just enough. We definitely took a downgrade from shooting, I would say. Jaren Jackson Jr. shoots the ball better, I would imagine, than Horace Grant does, at least from three. Mid-range, I don't really know. I'd probably go Horace there. Hedo Turkoglu, I loved as a shooter. And I think in the right role, in the right context, he'll be a really good connector between all of these players here, and a guy who could also play point, and then Lamar Odom as well. The thing basically I wanted was like anyone on this five could start the break. All of them could hold up decently enough defensively, if not be very good defensively. And then I think there's just enough diversification of their skill set to make for an interesting offense with some different flowing pieces there.
So, yeah, I guess where, like, when I think about positions, I'm mostly thinking defense, which is why I feel like Penny Hardaway has to be your point guard when you think about all the defensive side of the ball.
You don't think early career Lamar could stick point? I think he could swallow up folks. I mean, at least like 2006, 2007, no?
I don't think so.
I watched a lot of Lamar with the Lakers. I'm just saying back in the day. When I've been talking like championship Lakers, like as he got older, things got different for sure. He wasn't like a great defender in terms of like lockdown guy, but he wasn't bad.
I'm more saying like what positions can he guard? Like I think he was more like a 2 through 4 or 2 through 5 positional defender as opposed to like someone that ever was really guarding actual point guards.
I see what you're saying.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, you've got a ton of size there. You'll probably overwhelm a lot of people with size, and obviously there's shot blocking there as well. Yeah, I think there's a decent amount of passing in that group with Hito and Lamar. But yeah, that would be the one concern I would have. Is it seems to me that like if the opposition had a star guard, like you pretty much have to put Penny on them.
That's fair. Totally. All right. Well, I mean, this was interesting. I guess one more time, especially since I got to get my whole position sorted out. Let's run through before we move on to our final team here. Who we have as our revamped starting five, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So I have Penny Hardaway, Alex Caruso, I'll say OG Anunoby at the 3, Robert Covington at the 4, Shaq at the 5. We're going to Tucker you out.
I had Penny Hardaway at point, Desmond Bain at shooting guard, Trey Murphy the 3rd at small forward, maintaining Horace Grant at power forward for this team, and Shaquille O'Neal at center.
And then, of course, I had Penny Hardaway at the 1/2/1, Lamar Odom somewhere in there, Hidou Turkoglu, Jaren Jackson Jr., and, of course, Shaquille O'Neal. Right. Last but not least, I think we got to throw it back over to Josh because this team does hold a soft spot in his heart. I have been to a game with the Nuggets and the Thunder, and my friend comes with some Supersonics memorabilia. So, Josh, please detail the final team for us, and this is the Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, Seattle Supersonics.
Yes. So long before Chris Paul and Blake Griffin were blowing everybody's minds with all these like highlight reel dunks and Lob City and stuff, Lob City started in Seattle. And honestly, Lob City probably started before Payton and Kemp too. Also in Seattle, thanks to Tom Chambers. But we'll focus on Kemp and Payton right now. Like, that team was so strong defensively and so embracing of, like, I don't know how you want to say it, swag, pizzazz, style, panache. Like, when they dunked on you, they didn't just dunk on you. Like, Kemp pointed at you. or like, like, Gary wouldn't just toss like an alley-oop. He'd like save a ball going out of bounds through his legs to a trailer. Like, they were just one of the best shows on the hardwood at the time, and they get overlooked a lot for a couple of reasons. One, they played during the MJ, Scottie Pippen Bulls era, which kind of overshadowed everybody. And two, they were up in the Pacific Northwest. And for a long time, a lot of West Coast teams not named the Lakers got very little attention from the media overall because West Coast games start later on the East Coast. But like this team was so much fun. One of the best transition teams I've ever had the privilege of watching. Gary Payton, of course, is like one of the people you immediately think of when you think of an elite point of attack defender. Also, like, again, an elite transition player, like one of the best pushers in transition I've seen, and a very good post-up scorer for a guard. Not much of a spacer, not much of a shooter. He had his moments, but like, you're not really scared of Gary hitting threes necessarily. And then Shawn Kemp is one of, if not maybe the GOAT vertical spacer, lob threat. I think he probably is the GOAT. Blake obviously has some sway there. I still think overall Vince is a better dunker, but Kemp, like, you can't ask for a better vertical threat and a more threatening vertical threat. Also, really strong defensive rebounder, good defensive event generator guy, got a lot of steals, got a lot of blocks. Also, like Payton, not really much of a shooter. And maybe nowadays, if he came out, you'd probably actually play him a fair amount of minutes at the 5. But he still kind of struggled a little bit against like particularly large bigs. But yeah, those two were just entertainment incarnate.
Yeah, and I think another thing to mention about this group, again, all of these duos or trios that we're talking about weren't able to win it all. And for this team, it was a lot of just heartbreaking playoff defeats. It was a lot of 7-game series losses. I think in '93, it was to the Suns, where Charles Barkley had just an incredible Game 5 in that series. Of course, in '97, it was to the Houston Rockets with, Hakeem and Barkley and Drexler. So yeah, they had a lot. Oh, and they also had the famous first round defeat where they lost to Dikembe Mutombo as the 8th seed, and Dikembe, though, like at the peak of his powers, an absolutely dominant defensive force. So yeah, they had a lot of really heartbreaking defeats over this run, but they were constantly there. They were constantly winning high 50s games in the regular season. And constantly putting in pretty good playoff performances, just came up a little bit short. But yeah, as Josh said, really, really fun team to watch. And I think, like, for all of the talk about Gary Payton being the glove and, won the '96 Defensive Player of the Year, he was a really underrated offensive player. He was a heck of an offensive basketball player. And yeah, they shuffled around. I think the earlier teams when, in 93 had a little bit more depth and some veteran presence. And then 96, it was a little bit more focused on Payton and Kemp, but they maintained a pretty solid competitive basketball teams throughout that middle portion of the 90s.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, they were a consistent contender throughout all that time. And yeah, I mean, they were even good even after, for 2 years, even after trading Shawn Kemp, they made it work with Vin Baker, right? Like similar-ish type player. It was the first time in the playoffs. Similar-ish in terms of nowhere near the vertical guy of a Kemp, but like some serviceable. He played before, he did it decently. There you go. Yeah. Thank you for letting me kind of walk that back a little bit. But yeah, like they kind of had him in the fold and they did well. They ran it up until I want to say 2000, 2001. And then, kind of things fell apart. But yeah, 96 was really the big turning point. And a shout out to George Karl for, hiding your best defender on the greatest offensive player that wasn't LeBron James. Just kidding. But like, just in general, like I think that it was one of those things where, yeah, that's why I made it. Josh pointed out Steph Curry's the greatest. It was a horrible joke. Okay. But point being, yeah, I think that, I don't know. I definitely understand Gary Payton maybe not being totally healthy and obviously McMillan being out and all the things, but like, or McMillan being hampered. But bottom line, like you're only going for the championship. Like you only get one shot at it. As it turned out, that was the only shot for Seattle. Gary Payton had to wait another literally 10 years until he won a championship with Miami. And some guys, Nate McMillan, the great Hersey Hawkins, the great Sam Perkins, Shawn Kemp, like that was their one and only shot. They did not get another. So like, I think in that case, if you're going to Detlef Schrempf, thank you. Yep. Like I thought no, he went to Portland. No, he didn't win. Yeah. But bottom line, yeah, like these greats, like if you can play and you're healthy, you got to do what you got to do. And when, you put Gary Payton on Jordan, which they did after game 3. I think it was after game 3 they did it.
Right, when they were already down
exactly
3 to 0 in the series.
You could see the actual impact. Exactly. Then you can see the actual impact that, Gary Payton had on Jordan. So we'll never know, but it is one of the best what ifs. And those will probably remember watching The Last Dance and seeing Jordan's reaction to Gary Payton saying that is classic Jordan. But in my mind, like the numbers bear out that it was the problem. But yeah, with that being said, Garrett, or Josh, it's Seattle. Josh start, Garrett, and then myself on or mix it up, me and Garrett on Seattle. Who did you look for? How did you complement this team? How did you build this into the team that would have won the 96 NBA Final?
Again, I think you want to maintain that defensive edge they had, and much like Run TMC, this team was most dangerous in transition and pushing hard. So I wanted complementary players who help accelerate the pace. So again, guys who generate steals, blocks, rebounds, dangerous shooters who, when we are in the half court, the help defense can't really play too much towards the Payton Kemp pick and rolls and stuff. So I thought about 3 types that I wanted, like a wing who can generate those transition opportunities and space the floor, a swing forward who can kind of, again, generate transition looks, rebound, space, and also like a big who can defend bigger players so that Kemp doesn't have to, while spacing on offense, rebounding well, and again, generating stocks. So I was looking at swing forwards, and I was thinking again of guys I mentioned already, Robert Horry, Robert Covington, but I actually decided to go with 2 players under one of the other types I was looking at, which was the wings who can generate those transition opportunities and space in the half court while being good defensively. So I had previously mentioned Caruso. I had previously mentioned Mikal Bridges. And I'm bringing back up Lonzo Ball. This is a team that we want to push in transition really hard. So I wanted Lonzo Ball in that backcourt with Gary Payton, an excellent connector in the half court. can space very well for them, adds another strong defender. And again, he's going to juice that transition. But I also wanted Mikal Bridges over somebody like Covington or Ori, because I think this is a team where you do want that third scorer. You do want that person who, when the ball swings from the strong side to the weak side, and the defense is kind of shifted because of the Kemp Payton actions, that this guy can make something out of it, attack out of it. And so I wanted Lonzo Ball and Mikal next to Gary on the perimeter. And then for a big, I was thinking of guys like Serge Ibaka, like, a shot blocker, solid rebounder, 3-point shooter. Thinking of my guy Rafe LaFrentz, who was ahead of his time in terms of shot blocking, 3-point shooting. But ultimately, I had to go with somebody who I adore, which is Naz Reid. Again, talking about this Sonics team had a lot of swag, pizzazz, panache, style. Naz Reid is going to fit in so well with that. And I just really like the idea of Gary Payton, Lonzo Ball, Mikal Bridges, Shawn Kemp, and Naz Reid really ratcheting up the tension and the pressure on opponents defensively, and then just running like crazy. So those are the guys I went with.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I kind of went with a different approach. And my thought was more like, let's make this team somewhat like the 7-second or less Phoenix Suns. And so what I went with was, I actually am going to just put Shawn Kemp at center, like the Suns did with Amari Stoudemire in 2007.
Okay.
And really open up the lane for these pick and rolls. And so at power forward, I'm going with a guy I know Josh is a big fan of, Lauri Markkanen. And, he's a guy that can space the floor. He also has that off-ball shot creation as well, can curl off screens, make some plays. He provides some level of rim protection, even though we're not going with a traditional center here. And then I went with the Jet, Jason Terry. I thought, let's let Gary Payton fully be the defensive player of the year. Let's let him use a lot of his energy on the defensive end, provide some more shot creation on the ball, off the ball. Jet can do both. We can stick him on the weaker opposition backcourt player, right? And then the final guy I wanted a guy with some size, some strength, can do a little bit of everything. I'm going with J-Dub, Jalen Williams of the Oklahoma City Thunder, as a guy that, I think Gary Payton and Jason Terry, neither of those guys, I mean, they obviously have pick and roll craft, but neither of them are like getting all the way to the rim pretty consistently. So I like where Jalen Williams, with his size and strength, really puts pressure on the basket. I'm just going all offense with this group and relying on, really the strength of Gary Payton as a defender to make us decent enough on defense that, like, with the way we're scoring, there's not going to be anybody that can keep up.
I like that. I think that's a solid one. Solid team for sure. I want to say I went in a different direction, but don't know if I really did. So I kept Kemp at the 4. I kept Gary Payton, of course. I had a few different areas I wanted to go with for my shooting guard position. I strongly considered, and up until the last minute, and I still might go back to it, I really wanted Austin Reeves. I thought that Austin Reeves was a guy who is solid, it can play shooting guard, point guard, kind of run the offense, that sort of thing. But I feel like that's a great question. Ultimately, I felt like who was him from Max Kellerman in First Take, back in the day. If there's one shot to change the balance of the universe, who's taking that shot? Not Steph Curry, not LeBron, not Andre Iguodala. I want Monte Ellis. So I have him at my 2 if he's eligible. This is pending right now. It was a emotional decision, and I just threw him out there. We gotta look back. Oh, he was never an all-star, and he should have been in 2010. I will stand on that. Look at the numbers, and then don't come at me because I don't really want to argue. I just want you to look at the numbers. With that being said, Ellis at the 2. I have OG Anunoby at the 3, and then I took since I did use him already. Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna make a note. You know what it is? I'll switch it up. Gonna put Kemp back at the 5. I'm gonna put Kemp at the 5 and put Xavier McDaniel at the 4. So it's a little bit of a funky lineup. I was going to just stick with Sam Perkins, who I thought was a good fit with those Sonics teams, and I was just ain't broke, don't fix it. But I made my own little rule that I'm not using the same guy twice on a show because then I can just spam that person. And I used Sam Perkins already with the Clyde, Drexler, Terry Porter team. It's my own rule I put on myself, but because of that, the guy I had as an honorable mention is Xavier McDaniel, the X-Men. He's solid, strong, really good athlete, decent defender. Looked like a better defender than he actually was, but he was a decent defender. Offensively was pretty good. He was a supersonic. Started his career in Seattle. And so I like him at the 4. My honorable mention would have been Austin Reeves and Tony Kukoc. But yeah, we are that team is a nasty team. I think if it's the ethos of that era Supersonics team, like they were just kind of a nasty group. They flew, they did well, but they had some bite to them. They had some bark. And now we got some bite too.
There would be even more barking with your team. I think like that team that you constructed would be very good, and also maybe the most shit-talking team in NBA history. At least the most shit-talking lineup in NBA history.
Yeah, if there's just like if you can rank teams just purely based on players' confidence levels, your team is at an all-time high.
Oh, the irrational confidence team. I mean, you know how I am about that too. So, yes, give it to me. But yeah, I'm very, very excited with that team. I think honestly, self-evaluation might be a little light on shooting. Kemp at the 5 works well for him offensively. Just pick and roll game and rebounding everything. And he had a good mid-range jump shot. I think people kind of sleep on that. That mid-range was reliable. And even when he got a little, let's just say out of his athletic prime, a little bigger in Cleveland and Portland and Orlando, that jumper was probably the only thing that really traveled. And travel it did. I mean, he was a really solid player from there with that shot. And so I like him at the 5 there, but he definitely didn't stretch out. I could not speak there. He definitely didn't really stretch it out to 3. He would take some here and there, but that wasn't really his game. I watched some more games, and when it was open, he would take it. He just wouldn't really make it. The form looked good, just outside of his range. And so by doing that, Xavier McDaniel, sort of similar. Another guy, more 18 feet and in, didn't really stretch it super well. He, again, took some threes as well, just didn't make a whole lot of them. And I feel like that's kind of the ethos here with Monte Ellis. Love him. I think he's a guy who can play on and off ball. In his prime was a decent three-point shooter, but decent being 34%. Wasn't that great of a three-point shooter, definitely more of a mid-range guy. And then we already know Gary Payton, right? OG Anunoby's probably the one guy who shoots above league average on threes. And offensively, I want his job to really just be, a glorified PJ Tucker, assigned to the best perimeter guys, knowing that he can make a shot, knowing that he can maybe flash a little bit more offensively. But yeah, I would say offensively, ironically, this team is actually kind of weak for my taste from an offensive perspective. But I do like the total fit with, like I said, the ethos of what I was trying to go with, and the fact that there is some versatility between these guys, and that they hold up relatively well defensively. Relatively well. But yeah.
Should we go through and say our teams again?
I think we should. Let's start off, Garrett.
All right. So at point guard, I have Gary Payton. At shooting guard, I've got Jason Terry. But of course, if I need GP to guard the shooting guard, we can obviously flip that. At small forward, I've got J-Dub, Jalen Williams. At power forward, Lowry Markkanen. And at center, Shawn Kemp.
I've got Gary Payton, Lonzo Ball, Mikal Bridges, Shawn Kemp, and Naz Reid as my Seattle Supersonics.
I like it. And I have Gary Payton, the legend, the great Monte Ellis, OG Anunoby, Xavier McDaniel, and at the 5, Shawn Kemp. But yeah, this closes out the first part of our 1990s NBA Hold'em series. Real quick, rapid fire as we leave. What do you think? Well, let me get to Garrett first. Sir.
Well, I was just going to mention, just as a little preview for people for what part 2 will entail. We've already got the team selected, so should I just mention them right now?
Oh, drop it like this. Well, real quick, before we even do that, because I do want to leave them at the very end, something to look forward to. So I want that. But before we even do that, I wanted to ask y'all, what was your best of all the teams we did so far? Like, what was your personal best team reconstruction that you enjoyed here? And it could be your own. I mean, and it preferably you can nominate someone else, but preferably your own. Like, what was the best one that you look back like, you know what? I would like to see that team. Like, that would be a fun one to mess around with. Of the 4 teams that we did.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my favorite of my own, and like I didn't write your guys' down, otherwise I would mention one of yours.
No, nominate your own, please. Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry.
As far as mine, I think my favorite was that Run TMC team where I had Evan Mobley and Brooke Lopez as the complementary pieces. I think that makes it so that team has a pretty good balance on both ends of the floor while maintaining a pretty elite offense with tons of shooting and playmaking all over the floor. But then opens up transition opportunities. And the only real way you can have like an average or even slightly above average defense with multiple weak links is just having lots of rim protection. And that's what I got there. So I like that one out of my own.
I agree.
I mean, I would really love to play like 2K, even though I've sworn off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd really love to play my Sonics team in 2K. I feel like that would be so fun. But I think like not just in terms of team construction stuff, but I think like certain choices I really liked. I really liked you had Desmond Bain for Shaq and Penny, Garrett. Like I really liked that. I liked having additional like pick and roll ball handlers to go with Penny that Corban came up with, even if I don't necessarily buy Lamar as a 1. And then I also really like the idea of the finisher, Larry Markkinen, with Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp, like a taller deadlift shrimp, basically. A taller, more like aggressive, athletic deadlift shrimp.
Yeah, that was solid. I definitely thought we all had some fun with these and just enjoyed them. I liked Josh's look at the Supersonics. Thought that was really kind of unique. Really though, my favorite from Josh was probably the magic and just the philosophy of tiring them out. Garrett, I loved you leaning all offense. It's not a thing that I usually see from my friend here, so I appreciate that for what it is, Garrett. Thank you for that. And then for myself, I kind of like my Blazers team. Again, if I was playing NBA 2K or anything that I could kind of work with, like, I would love it because I would love to see how I would fit. Like, in theory, the offense works great and the defense is passable. And I think if you look at the numbers and the player is fine, but, there's always some difference between that and actual schematics and how that would work. So I would love to see that. But between the spacing and the wide open offense that I would try to utilize would be great. Then honorable mention, I really thought we all did a good job with Run TMC and the different ways that we attempted to address that. But I guess now I am chomping at the bit, Garrett, for you to give the folks a teaser of what to look forward to the next time we get back on this series.
Yeah, so our thought was when we had already done the 1998 Indiana Pacers in a previous episode where we did Reggie Miller and Rick Smits. And so we did four more in this episode. So we have 4 more to go to cover basically every year of the 1990s. So a part 2 will include the 1992 Cleveland Cavaliers, and the duo is Mark Price and Brad Doherty. Then we've got the 1993 Phoenix Suns, who made the NBA Finals, of course, and lost to the Bulls in 6 games that year. And the duo we're doing for them, Kevin Johnson and Charles Barkley. And then in 1994, a team that came just 1 win away from the NBA championship, the 1994 New York Knicks. And the duo we selected for that, Patrick Ewing and John Starks. And then we also have the 1997 Detroit Pistons with Grant Hill and Joe Dumars. And I made a mistake out the gate. We actually will have 5 more in this last in part 2. And the final one is the 1999 Toronto Raptors, where we get to reimagine a Raptors team around a duo that really never got to be fully utilized in the likes of Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady.
I'm very excited already. Just hearing you say, I'm like, all right, let's go. It's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I like the way that this kind of organically formed. And now we've gotten a mix coming up here of some young teams that never quite took off the ground, if we're talking about the Raptors, or some lesser known teams in the late 90s, like the Pistons, and some other teams more well known, like the Suns, and some teams that we really don't talk about enough, like the 92 Cleveland Cavaliers. So definitely excited for a nice mix there. And that'll be a fun one to get going on. So definitely something to get y'all to look forward to. But real quick, Josh, Garrett, please, before we let y'all go, plug where you can find yourselves or where you can find other people, whatever you'd like to share for the good folks to check out.
Well, I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad, so I don't do a whole lot on Twitter right now. I'm also trying to detox from Twitter.
Yeah, I love how you said Twitter with so much disdain there.
Yeah. It's the same thing you'll hear whenever I say the name Clay, both because Clay Bennett stole the Seattle Supersonics, and because some guy named Clay just got divorced from one of my wife's bridesmaids, who's super cool. And so, like, Clay can just suck it right now, particularly Clay Bennett, but this other Clay too. But anyway, I digress. I do mentor people who want to work in basketball or who want to take the next step, get to the next level in their career in the industry. And if that's something that's interesting to you, you can reach me via email at josh@myhoopscareer.com. Set up a call, figure out a way to help get you immediate next steps that you can start moving yourself towards that dream job in basketball. Other than that, I always suggest you follow my guys here, Corban, Garrett. They do amazing stuff. I know Garrett just recently dropped his end of the year music stuff. He's got more stuff coming, movies, TV, other stuff. All of it is well worth your time. Also check out Swish Theory and all the fantastic people working there. And beyond that, just always search out good, actionable, helpful basketball analysis, because not all of it is.
There you go.
You can find me on Twitter at Garrett Bugay. That's GarrettBugay. And as Josh mentioned, I just recently put out my 2023 year in music list on my blog, and you can find that as the pinned tweet on my Twitter profile. But essentially, I went through and created multiple different playlists. One is about 2 hours long, and another one, if you're really so inclined, if you really love music, is 14 hours of just 2023 songs. I know Josh and his daughter Zoe have been listening to it a little bit. And I also created a list of 52 of my favorite albums that I heard throughout the year and separated them in different categories, listed my favorite songs and on each. So, if you're looking for some new tunes, there's a great place for for some recommendations there. And as Josh also mentioned, I've got movies and TV coming. I think movies actually will be up second this year. I'm at 77 movies watched for 2023. I think once I hit 80, I'm going to write up the piece. And so that should be coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And TV after that. But you can also check out my podcast, Duncan Dynasty, DUNKIN DYNASTY. These two guys have been on there. And I used to have it out, an episode out every week. Now it's just kind of whenever I feel like it. So, subscribe to that and it'll go into your feed whenever the next episode comes out. But yeah, thanks.
I'm excited for that. As Josh pointed out in the chat, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Godzilla -1 because I did miss that conversation you had about it, and that was such a good movie for me. I can't wait to read the piece. Bottom line, about myself, you can follow me on Twitter if you're so inclined at Corban NBA, CORBAN NBA. Check out Basketball Intelligence. It's a newsletter that I help with. We curate the best stories of the day, and we get them all together for you in your inbox to check out. In fact, I am about to get started on the one dropping tomorrow. So definitely make sure to check that out. Basketball Intelligence, just Google that. I mean, it's a really good resource. I'm saying it not only because, yes, I work there, but like even before working there, like it was something that was really cool to be a part of. And now seeing more of the work that goes behind the scenes, I have a greater appreciation for what we try to do to get you caught up with all of the great basketball analysis that you need with none of the fluff, or at least very little of it in my case. Aside from that, I would encourage you, please check out Josh's My Hoop Career. Check out Garrett's amazing content. Check out Sports Ethos, because where Round Ball Ramble is, Sports Ethos on Twitter, all one word, sportsethos.com. And then last, but certainly not least, check out the fine folks of Swish Theory at Swish Theory on Twitter, all one word, swishtheory.com, where you'll find this podcast and so much more in terms of draft content, team building concepts, and content there, player profile pieces on players that you don't normally think of, all kinds of great work there. So definitely make sure to check that out. But that'll do it. Another monster episode for the big unholy three here on the Roster Reconstruction podcast. We'll be back real soon. But until next time, for Josh, for Garrett, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty. I'll be back here in a minute. All right, y'all.